Welcome to episode 278 of the Grid Talk podcast. And today we are here to preview the 2023 Miami Grand Prix. My name is Louis Edwards, and joining me today we have Grid Talk co-hosts Owain Medford.
Hello.
And Sophia Rachmon.
Hi.
But before we get into this episode, we must thank our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player records for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BLEAV, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, Owain, we will obviously start with Red Bull, who will be having a different livery for once. God knows how shocking it may be, but it does look like they now have a quite feisty Ferrari on their tails, given just how quick Charles Leclerc was in Baku. But it does seem that they have their race pace still very much intact, and it does look like another 1-2 could be on the cards.
Yeah, I think you're betting against the run of form to suggest that Red Bull won't be on the top podium. The only interesting thing will be the inter-team battle, I think, really, when it comes to them. Obviously, we saw that quite visibly in Baku, to the point where Christian Horner has to come on the radio. I think Max was a bit sort of spooked by Perez being so much faster than him in Baku, or at least able to compete with him. And then obviously the issues with George Russell didn't help. So Verstappen's going to want to be getting back to winning ways. And obviously Perez is going to want to try and close that 6-point gap between the two even more. Supposedly supposedly Perez is a street circuit specialist. But the thing about Miami is that it's an all-new surface, and it's also a different kind of track. There aren't so many slow corners. There's more the kind of faster corners, high speeds, the high-speed direction changes that Max Verstappen seems to be able to deal with so much better. So it might be more of an advantage of Verstappen. But I wouldn't count Perez out. We're going to have to. There's a little bit of an unknown, so we're going to have to see how it goes going into the weekend.
Yeah, there is definitely some certainty of unknown, but Sophia, as you were saying, Sergio Perez, king of the streets, supposedly, is doing very well this season. He's definitely putting the pile on Max, and I think David Croft said very aptly in the commentary after Azerbaijan is, if it wasn't for Checo, Max would be running off into the wilderness with this world championship.
100%. It's going to be interesting how the pairing is going to be throughout the season, because they're only 6 points difference, which that can change in one race. And as you mentioned, like Miami, it's technically street. Checo being king of the streets. We'll see how it goes, because looking back at the results last year, they had some decent battles with Perez last year in Miami. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Also, though, the straights, though, with the circuit looking into it, that could be also Ferrari's kind of silver lining to try to keep being competitive with Perez and Max 100%. But yeah, I mean, usually in another league, like even when they were like trying to battle potentially towards the last couple of laps in Baku, it was just Max just couldn't keep up with it. And obviously with Checo as well, he can manage these tires very well. So with Miami, with the new resurfacing and like the structure of the circuit, we'll definitely see tire degradation come into play for this race next weekend.
Yeah, it certainly is going to be a bit of an unknown, and whether or not it would be underwater is also probably a better thing to look at. But away, we'll move on to second place, and still second place in the constructors' is Aston Martin. It wasn't as great of a showing in Baku as we've previously seen this season, but still fourth place for Fernando Alonso was very solid. Came close to Charles Leclerc. Without these sort of like massive long straights and a bit more twisty circuits that we've seen, it could favour Aston Martin a bit better.
Yeah, I think they really lost out without having that DRS consistently available to them, and it seemed to be not so much of a weekend that suited them in general, to be honest. And that said, I think Fernando Alonso put it best in his interview, saying, basically that we had a car that wasn't so good, and we were pretty close at the end to the Ferrari, which have had their best weekend yet. So it's there are still positives. I think this is a bit more of a traditional circuit is Miami, which is a weird thing to say, but it's more like a standard kind of circuit, with the layout and things like that, as I get some funny looks. No, it's a bit more of a normal looking circuit compared to sort of Bahrain, Jeddah even. There's sort of elements of Jeddah in Miami and also Albert Park as well. I think it's probably, in my view, it's probably going to come a bit more towards Aston Martin. I think they just had a bit of an off week. I think everyone has a track that maybe doesn't necessarily suit their car. So I think this is a weekend where they can get back up and be challenging Red Bull and Mercedes for some serious points. I think it's just it's just a matter of time, really.
Yeah, certainly. But Sophia, do you think there's, given sort of quite a significant sort of what felt like a big drop off from Aston Martin last weekend, do you think there's any fears at Aston Martin at all that they are being found out slightly now that Ferrari seem to have got their act together? Mercedes try and, get a bit more pace back. Is there going to be any worries at Aston Martin that their fight is, obviously it's not currently with Red Bull, but they're going to be in a much harder fight with Mercedes and Ferrari going forward?
I wouldn't say Ferrari's back. It's been only one weekend. I think we need to see how it goes in Miami and how it goes for the next couple of races. We got 5 races in 6 weekends, so it'll be kind of a more testament to see how these teams are going to come back into it. But I think one of the biggest things is that DRS issue with Aston Martin. Even though they had tow a few times in Baku for some, like with qualifying and some of the sprints and everything, that's the key factor, because you're going to need the DRS with bad straights in Miami. Like, it's going to be one of the crucial factors. So hopefully they'll have it fixed and sorted in time for this weekend coming. But Mercedes as well, as they're getting back into pace, they're being more consistent with both George and Lewis, and given off of last year as well, Sebastian Vettel retired, so there was only Stroll scraping up a point, finishing 10th last year. So they don't have as much data compared to both Ferrari and Mercedes, who both had their drivers finishing within the top 6. Yeah, because George finished 5th and Lewis finished 6th. So they have potentially more data and information compared to Aston Martin. So we'll see. But like I said, it's that DRS. They need to hopefully get that fixed and sorted, and maybe we'll see how on par they will be with Ferrari and Mercedes this weekend coming.
Yeah. Now to Mercedes, Owain. As Sophia said, talking about data, of course, Mercedes are coming to this track with a vastly different car than what they were having to deal with last time they were in Miami. So you would think that they're gonna come into this weekend and hope, as Mercedes are definitely doing right now, that their car is going to be a bit better suited. The lack of porpoising is going to make them a bit faster and will allow them to maybe push for a podium.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to get a couple of gimmies right off the bat with the car. Obviously, they seem to have sorted out the porpoising. I mean, if we remember last year at Miami, it was terrible. It was the worst they'd had it all season by that point. So by comparison, this is probably going to be this is a net positive. Like, they go into the weekend hopefully not having that issue and sort of not having to spend time legislating for that issue right off the bat. So hopefully this there's got to be some confidence there for the team. That said, I don't think it's all good. The Mercedes seemed decent at Baku. It seemed relatively decent actually. All different places, all the tracks we've been to, but it's still not obviously fast enough to be seriously challenging the Aston Martins, and particularly the Red Bull, on one lap pace. It's decent over a race, which is where I think they focused a lot of that's sort of the strength of the W13. I think they've tried to carry that forward while losing some of the bad traits of that car. But I'm not sure it's going to be a totally happy weekend for them. There are again those that, like, Miami's not exactly got short straights. It's and we didn't see them blasting past people with a huge difference in speed in Baku. And to be fair, Miami's actually a higher. You need a bit more downforce in. You need more downforce in Miami, just because it's got those sweeping turns that you don't really have in Baku. You can rely a little bit more on the mechanical grip. So, I think it's not going to be smooth sailing, but there's reason for promise to be had at Mercedes for Miami.
Yeah, it's definitely with Mercedes this season, it's definitely always positives and negatives. Of course, Sophia, they've had a pretty bad string of bad luck this season. Then I don't think everyone needs reminding what the bad luck in Baku is. But I personally, you'll have to give me your thoughts on this, but I personally think that this is a great opportunity for Mercedes to this weekend have a really clean weekend, because as Owain said, we've had both drivers who have been looking very solid, not really too much separating them at the moment. And it's a really good time to start finding a bit more consistency and get their season a little bit more under control.
I 100% agree. And given how much of a difference the car has been compared to last season, I think they will be very consistent. Obviously, they did finish very well last season, but I think one of them could be potentially on the podium this weekend. I think it's definitely doable for sure, given they are getting quite stronger and bringing the battle to Aston Martin and to Ferrari a bit more. They're not in contention with Red Bull. Let's be honest, nobody's in contention with Red Bull. They've just kind of run with it, so to speak. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much of a difference it's going to be compared to last year. I'm excited to look at like the data differences as well, and look at how they will be going down the straights, given they were pretty much bouncing throughout the car last season in Miami. So there'll be a good indicator on how well this new car will be for the rest of the season as well, because you got some other tracks that have some decent long straights as well. So we'll see how it goes on this weekend.
Yeah, very much so. So fourth place, Owain, Ferrari. And I know Sophia didn't quite agree with me on this one, but it was certainly a lot more positive from Ferrari in Baku. Their one lap pace definitely is improved. Their race pace definitely, of course, still needs working on. They were so far off the pace of the Red Bull over the course of a full race distance. But surely there's got to be some positives going into Miami. They know that their one lap is good. Obviously, their straight line speed may affect them on their long straights, but there's a lot of tight parts of Miami, and it's not always the easiest place to overtake.
I think, I don't know. I think with Ferrari, it's a little bit difficult to say. Is this a false dawn, or is it just, things came together for them? I think obviously, you can take a lot of confidence from the fact that consistently at two different times of the day, Charles Leclerc managed to get on pole, which obviously serves their one lap pace. The one lap pace is obviously decent. And the issue is that, I don't know. There's something to be said for the fact that it's more difficult to overtake. Obviously, Baku, you can just, especially if you're in a Red Bull, you can just sit behind with your incredibly efficient DRS and blast past someone. And I think it was also a case of, Leclerc knowing that and not bothering to fight, because all he knows he's going to do is waste a load of time. So by comparison at Miami, as you say, it's a bit more difficult. Who's to say that this new surface won't they could try if they can get on pole, to sort of help sort of help the Red Bull burn out the tyres, just be fast enough on the straights to not let them get past, build that gap in the corners, and hopefully overcome the sort of inherent speed of the Red Bull. I think that's what most people would be planning to do if they could get a pole. I think the question is, can they repeat getting a pole position? And I'm not sure they can. It's difficult to say, really. I mean, obviously, yeah. No, I don't know. I honestly don't know what's up at all with Ferrari. It's so inconsistent. I can't guarantee that they're going to be good. Hopefully, but hopefully for their sake, because obviously it's been a rough couple of weeks with who they're losing and where things seem to be falling apart at the seams, and it seems Ferrari is sort of peaked and they're on the downward trend again, which is worrying.
Yes, well, I don't think even Ferrari can guarantee that Ferrari ever do well because, well, they're Ferrari. They're kind of like the Spurs of the F1 world. But Sophia, even if their qualifying pace isn't going to be good enough to maybe hold off the likes of Red Bull, which of course is going to be the most difficult part, especially against their rivals of Aston Martin and Mercedes, it could possibly play into their hands a little better and try and hold them off. As if, at the end of the day, Saturday determines where you start on Sunday, as Will Buxton says, and if they can keep ahead of the likes of the Mercedes and the Red Bull, and not the Red Bull, and the Aston Martin, it's going to do wonders for their Constructors' Championship standings.
Definitely. I mean, we've already said on this podcast, like, Red Bull's just running with it. So given the fact that it was a Ferrari 1-2 in qualifying last year, and then they finished second and third with Max going from third to first, I think them trying to be consistent, which might be a big ask for them for this weekend, is probably the crucial thing. I think they just need a clean and easy race. No more retirements, no more issues, but they definitely have the pace for the qualifying to take pole. One of them for sure, probably Charles, because he's been more consistently on pole last season and this season as well so far. So it's just more maintaining the pace, making sure Max will run with it and go past them like last year. But it'll be, like he said, maintaining it against the Mercedes and the Aston as well. It'll be probably the key and crucial part of this weekend. But just trying not to put a foot in the wrong place is the biggest challenge for them. Whether that's the driver, whether that's the car, whether that's the strategy, which is probably the biggest part that might have issues on the weekend. But yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yes, it's always interesting trying to figure out what Ferrari are trying to do. It's also a massive headache. So we'll see what they get up to. But Owain, we take a 48-point gap already, after 4 races, down to 5th to McLaren. And putting personal bias aside, I genuinely think they had a decent showing out in Baku, given how awful Bahrain and Jeddah were. Last weekend, Australia was good. Last weekend, maybe Lando could have made some quicker overtakes, but in and around the points, qualifying is now looking a little bit more promising. Do you reckon they're still finding their way through the midfield, or are they just going to be now that kind of 5th place team coming into Miami?
I think they were significantly helped, to be honest, by the complete implosion of Alpine. I think those are the biggest rivals, really, because the AlphaTauris don't really seem to be able to compete, be that through mistakes or pace. But yeah, it was a promising weekend for McLaren. Better than they've had in a while, like you say, which I think is even more positive step. Just when you take into account, I think I remember just slating McLaren on the qualifying show, on the sprint show, for their poor performance. But I didn't know at the time, or I hadn't remembered at the time, that Oscar Piastri has been through apparently quite a horrible stomach bug. Hopefully he's over that. Hopefully there's a few after effects of that. But to be able to put in the performance that he did, with that, is not, is to be commended. He's only just outside the points with his finishing position. And he is in and around, like he is in and around Lando Norris, which is good to see, bearing in mind he's only had 4 races in the car now. He's getting used to it, and obviously Lando's been there quite a while and knows how the car behaves from last year. Whereas Oscar Piastri has obviously been out for with the expensive test sessions on Alpine's dollar aside, has had a difficult run of it. So yeah, I think they've got decent, two roughly equally skilled drivers. They're set up with the good drivers. They seem to be coming forward a little bit, and that's only going to improve as the season goes on, hopefully, with the cost cap. So, but going into Miami, I don't think we're going to see the fruits of that yet. I think the real question is, can Alpine get their act together? I think unfortunately McLaren is sort of hinging on other people. If Alpine or someone like or Haas even get their act together a bit, they could find themselves with a bit more competition. But luckily they've got the drivers to fight it, and the team seems to be moving in the right direction. So hopefully that's an all right weekend for them.
Yes, hopefully. But Sophia, as you were saying about Ferrari being a bit of, you don't know where they're going to be. McLaren, again, are just another team where you have no idea where they're going to be come one weekend or the next. And it's hard to say whether this is going to continue for the rest of the season, or it's going to, just sort of be blocked at the start. But how much of an impact is just this start already going to have on the rest of McLaren's season? Because already they, as I said, they found themselves 48 points off Ferrari in 5th. Obviously, they're ahead of Alpine, but we know what they're like at the moment. It's like, how much is this going to hinder the rest of their season?
I think it'll be most of the season. I think the fact that there's so much of a gap already in so early on in the rounds of the season, I agree with your initial opening with McLaren. I think they're going to be staying 5th. It's going to be a battle between them and Alpine. That's probably, and maybe even third and Haas. Like, to be fair, actually, looking at the points, like McLaren, Alpine, Haas, and Alfa Romeo could all kind of be like battling each other towards the end of the season. But yeah, McLaren got lucky with Alpine. I'll say that, because with all the issues that Alpine had in Baku, with Ocon, with Gasly, with engine problems going on fire and everything, I think it gave them more. Obviously, it supported them a bit more so they can try to get more points to the team. But obviously, they didn't really do as much points needed. I think Oscar's still trying to find himself within the team as well, as mentioned about the stomach bug and everything as well. I think hopefully he'll get better. I think he has. I think he's probably felt the best he's been on Sunday. So obviously he should get better by this weekend coming. But I think he's still trying to settle into the car. He's still trying to understand it a bit more as well. Whereas, as previously mentioned, Lando's been in this car for ages, and he knows the setup very well. He knows how this car runs. So I think given another 2 to 3 rounds, and we might see McLaren kind of getting close up in the standings and trying to maybe bring the battle to Ferrari. I don't think it's too much of a gap right now so far, but I could be mistaken. We can go into the summer and they actually be quite close to Ferrari or whoever will be in 4th. Could be Aston, could be Mercedes, who knows? Definitely not Red Bull. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, they just need a decent and consistent race. Obviously, looking at last season in Miami, Lando did not finish, I think. He had an incident with Pierre Gasly. Oh no, he did finish. Did he?
No, he crashed out and he hit Gasly.
I was like, at the starting grid. Yeah, so obviously that was probably, hopefully he doesn't do that again. And doesn't do stupid rookie mistakes. He's been in F1 too long to do those stupid mistakes with Gasly. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll be a decent race. I'm hoping one of them will get some points for the team that's needed.
Yeah, it's exactly what they need right now. It's consistent point scoring to help them not completely drown, as Alpine did last weekend. Owain, there's, everyone says when you hit rock bottom, there's only one way you can go, and that is up. So I think Alpine and fans of Alpine can probably take a bit of comfort in the fact that surely it can't get any worse than Azerbaijan.
I'd hesitate to say that. I find Formula One always has a habit of raising the bar on that one. As you say, it was an absolutely awful weekend for Alpine. I think the only thing that they didn't have happen was cars blowing up in the points paying positions. I mean, even then they still managed to find a way right at the end of the race to cause some more drama. But yeah, no, it, like you say, it cannot get worse than this. I don't think reasonably. It's I don't know. It's a little difficult, I think, for Alpine right now. I don't think that this is going to be a trend going on. I think this is sort of a one-off for them. But yeah, that they will be wanting to get just a car in a decent points paying position. They've got 4 points each of Alpine's drivers, so they'll be wanting just something out of this weekend. To be honest, they'll probably just want the testing from free practice, because honestly, I think that's probably one of the bigger things they lost. Obviously, they lost potentially a boatload of points with the various issues and starting so far back, and then obviously having to pit, Esteban Ocon on the last lap and sending him right down the order. But I think the bigger thing is that they need to get the car out and running, because they lost a huge amount of running, and that's what I think what scuppered their weekend most. That's the biggest harm. Obviously Miami's the next sort of the next normal weekend, so hopefully they can get some decent data, get a decent result in the race, stay out of trouble, and maybe hope someone else has a bad weekend as they did.
Yeah, and Sophia, I feel like similar to what Owain said, like we've still yet to actually see the best of this Alpine car. You got to think Gasly had to start all the way from the back and make his way through in Bahrain, and Ocon retired. Of course, they both finished in the points in Saudi, but it still wasn't a great race for them. They both hit each other in Australia. They both just had awful weekends last weekend, but we know it's a good car. We know it's competitive. It's just a matter of when are we going to see how competitive this Alpine is.
Yeah, because I mean, listening back to some of the previous podcasts that we've done in the beginning of the season and looking at testing, I said Alpine would have been one to watch. And right now I'm pretty much eating my words for that, given how disastrous these couple rounds have been. But I think they will be very competitive. I give it another couple rounds. I mean, they've just, like you said, they've just not had the best couple starts. I think they just need to do a more clean and consistent race and get some decent points, because Ocon, if you think about last year as well, he was one of the most consistent drivers in the points, getting the points needed for Alpine for the team, with some random ones from Fernando Alonso taking some weird positions, finishing from the grid. But I think it's more when we're going to see it, as you mentioned. And it's just, I hope it's going to be maybe Miami. I hope it'll be in the next couple rounds, because we don't have that. Well, we have a decent amount of rounds still left to go, but they need to start getting their act together. Some of it's not been their faults. There's been crashes, there's been incidents, but like the ones that have been caused directly from them, I think could have been easily avoidable. So hopefully we'll see. Also as well, they had upgrades that was meant to be in Baku, and they weren't able to really test and see. So it'll be interesting coming into Miami to see what those upgrades will be again, if they are going to change them, or we can actually see what they should have done in Baku. So that'll be kind of a big one to watch to see, is how good and how much of a pace they'll have going into qualifying, and also just race pace as well, for the Miami on the weekend.
Yeah, it's only having one practice session in Baku certainly curtailed a lot of probably their plans. And of course, they wouldn't have found out until a few days before anyway, so it would have all just been a bit of a mess. Owain, P7 with 7 points is Haas. Haas are an odd one, because we know there is pace in that car. They've shown it. Nico Hulkenberg's had some great qualifying session. Magnussen has been, has had his moments. but it just seems that they just can't get everything together with that car consistently yet. And it's kind of just, they're in like this weird sort of purgatory of have great potential to, really challenge the likes of Alpine, but then also just then do Haas things and not score points.
We see this a lot, though, to be honest, from Haas, don't we? Because we see Haas often starts the season with a decent amount of pace, and then they don't particularly effectively develop the car, and then they go backwards when teams like even Williams. Williams obviously had a great weekend, and they had a weekend that suited their car with the car being fast enough on the straights, and obviously having being beneficial for them. So a team that would you would say for Haas would have started the season behind them have stolen points. If we look at, obviously Hülkenberg had not a great race. He did a similar strategy to Ocon, and the lack of a second safety car really hurt them. Well, the first safety car hurt them, and then the lack of the second safety car hurt them even more. Magnussen had a bit more of a normal race, but obviously, he didn't finish in the points. He finished in 13th. He had Gasly and Ocon behind him, which was a bit of a miracle. So it's just unfortunately he just didn't get to go. They have not managed to go forward in that race, and it looks like it's more of the status quo where they're just slightly falling backwards, which, as you say, is a bit baffling, just because it's their car has seemed to have pace throughout the season so far. And they've finished relatively high up on the odd occasion. Even as high as 7th in Australia, even though it was a bit of a weird race. So I think maybe it could just be that it doesn't really suit their car, the way the track is, and they can hope for it to be a bit more conventional in Miami. I think that's their biggest hope. Otherwise, it's sort of it's a bit early to start that decline this season.
Yeah. But Sophia, this is their first of 3 home races they're going to have as a team this season. And they've not always had the best record in the US. And it's something that they'll certainly want to change because, as we're saying, this lack of consistency and this sort of general downwards trend that they go on every season, surely it can't be happening now. It's only round 5.
Yeah, I mean, even just like looking at the results, we had one retirement of Kevin Magnussen after the hit with Stroll last year in Miami, and then Mick finished last due to, I think he had like the pirouette spin, if I remember correctly, in Miami. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, as you said, the record for US races for Haas has been pretty much 0-3 kind of when it comes to how they've been performing, but we'll see. I think, I feel like the track might be better suited to them. Obviously, not every single car is going to be suited for every single track. So this will be a good indicator to see whether Haas can actually pull it out of the bag and kind of get some more points. I mean, if you look at the driver standing right now, Nico Hülkenberg's 10th, which is a little bit surprising because we thought when it was announced that he was coming in that Kevin was just still going to run with it, given Nico's been out of the game for a while, to be fair. Obviously, he was a reserve driver and he's been a super sub throughout the last couple of seasons due to drivers with illnesses, COVID, and all that. But yeah, it's interesting. It's surprising to see. Obviously, Kevin's just not had to be fair, Haas did not have the best weekend in Baku as well. Issues, situations, and all that as well. So I hope they can actually get some decent points, or just better finishes than they have compared to last year in Miami and just compared to last weekend in Baku.
Yeah, a lot of teams just didn't have the cleanest of weekends in Baku, and as we go to these final 3 teams, there's not a single one here that did have a good weekend in Baku. Alfa Romeo Owain, Bottas was pretty much last in the race the entire time. I think he made like 3 stops in the end, and Zhou's wasn't, he didn't do anything remarkable. But it just seems to be a weird trend of Alfa Romeo. They don't seem to be all that competitive. They don't seem to be anywhere. I think they go pretty much forgotten most weekends because they don't do anything sort of remotely significant.
Yeah, I mean the most we saw of Alfa Romeo of an Alfa Romeo, I think, was Guan Yu Zhou having to pit for to retire the car in Azerbaijan. I mean, it's not been a good season so far. They've obviously scored points, as every team has. Bottas obviously came last this time, and Zhou was not classified because of the retirement. You could probably attribute this a bit to the chaos in Australia, but Zhou got 9th and Bottas was 11th, so there was potential for them to fight for points had things not gone completely mental. Saudi Arabia was not a good race for them, really. Neither of them getting the points. Bottas again last of the finishes, and then Zhou in 13th, and then in Bahrain, which is probably their most successful. Apart from Australia, it's the most successful normal race to date. Zhou was 16th and Bottas was 8th. So I think it's a case of we're just seeing they don't have a huge amount of form, and that clearly goes away when they've got high speed circuits. Now, hopefully, I've talked a lot about Miami being more conventional. Hopefully it comes towards them, but I really don't see it. I think it's going to be another painful weekend, and I think they've got a mountain to climb, and they really just can't wait for 2026 when they're going to get some Audi money.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a long 3 years now for Alfa Romeo. Well, we'll be Sauber for 2 years before they get their Audi money. Sophia, AlphaTauri. Now, Tsunoda got points. Yay. Congratulations, Yuki. But Nick de Vries put it in the wall. And unfortunately, this is slightly becoming a bit of a trend for AlphaTauri this season, where we get Yuki getting the odd points finish, never really going out there and shining. And Nick, unfortunately, not getting to grips with this AlphaTauri as quickly as he got to grips with that Williams last year. But I think you do have to give Nick somewhat of the benefit of the doubt that he is in his first full season. But the team is really going south at the moment, and they are far from the team that we were seeing, just a few years ago, with Pierre Gasly finishing like 6th nearly every other race. Yeah,
they've kind of, comparing it to Red Bull, one's gone up and one's gone down pretty much in progressions. But yeah, I mean, AlphaTauri, weird weekend last with Yuki in the sprint with the wheel coming off and everything, and then obviously Nick crashing in the race. I think Nick was also unwell as well in Baku, so don't know what that was as well, but we'll see. I mean, Nick's also not raced in Miami before as well, so that's also going to show how he is as a driver, because like I said, he's never raced that before. Yuki has 1 year under his belt in Miami, albeit I think he DNF'd. No, he didn't DNF, but he finished 12th. But he did have, I think, a situation one time with Gasly, I think, in the Miami last year, if I'm not corrected. But we'll see. I think it's interesting that obviously with Frank Toss leaving at the end of the season, mind you, that was like prearranged ages ago, apparently, according to listening to Ted's notebook. The kind of restructure of the team will be interesting to see going forward as well. But yeah, it just needs to be more consistent, just clean. Yuki's very unpredictable. I think he's the new Latifi, I'll say, of this year. And you just never know what comes out of Yuki's driving. Sometimes it's remarkable points. Sometimes it's losing a wheel and having to pull out gaffer tape sometimes as well. But yeah, we'll see how it is. I'm more interested in seeing more Nick than I am seeing Yuki for this race. And again, because it's unknown for him, and that'll show how well of a driver he is. I think he could be in contention for points potentially if the setup is good for the car for the weekend.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't just one rear wheel he went through. He went through 2. He did it twice. It was not. I think the point was a very generous gift for Yuki at the end of that Baku weekend. But finally, we come to the last place team, and it's a team that I don't feel like they should be last place. They have been, overall quite a much more solid team, I feel like, than the two teams at least above them. But Williams, they sat on there with 1 point. Albon, I think, was just doing the best job he can. He was definitely making the most of just how quick that Williams is in a straight line. And, of course, Logan had his issues, and I think that's fair to say. But, there's quite a lot of tight turny bits in Miami, but we also must remember there are two very long full throttle zones also in Miami, which could definitely swing in Williams' favour, maybe in qualifying, but also could be in the race as well.
I mean, I think it's important to know. I've just had a look through the stats. Apart from the first race, Logan Sargent has been classified in 16th for every single race after, I believe. And Alex Albon he's finished 10th in Bahrain, and has then been a DNF for 2 races afterwards, and then and only got to 12th in 12th in Azerbaijan, I believe. It's been a weird time, I would say. I wouldn't actually call it that successful when that's happened. Hopefully it's decent for Williams, but yeah, if we go by the form book, Logan Sargent will be in 16th.
Yeah, very possibly. And, consistency is key in Formula One, and in your first season, you do have to, of course, give him the benefit of the doubt. It's better than being 20th as Mazepin was consistently in his first season. So I would take it.
Well, that's because Logan Sargent's a Formula One driver, and Mazepin is Mazepin.
I can't remember the last time Latifi finished 16th. So, but we'll see. But we will now move on to, of course, the predictions for this upcoming Miami weekend. And Sophia will bring it on to you. So Saturday, of course, we'll start. Who will be on pole position for you?
Charles. I think Ferrari's 1 lap race pace is absolutely on fire. So I think it'll be Charles. If not, it'll be Carlos. But I do think Charles has been consistent with getting poles but not wins. So let's just keep that stat running again.
Yeah, Charles does have a good record at street tracks. He's called Sergio Perez king of street tracks, but Charles Leclerc has been on pole in multiple street tracks. So, we have Mr. Saturday and Mr. Sunday for street tracks. But Owain, who have you got on pole?
On pole, I'm going to go with Verstappen. It seems like the sort. I don't think confidence is going to be shaken that much. I think he's going to blast it.
Well, I'm going to break the mold, only very, very slightly, and stick Checo on pole. I think he's had a good weekend, and he'll have a lot of momentum going into this weekend. So, Sophia, back to you. So, moving on to the next day, the Sunday. Who's going to be on your podium?
Oh, I think P3 will be Charles, P2 Max, and P1 Checo. Keeping on with the streets, king of the streets. I think, it's a boring podium. It's now kind of a given almost. Maybe sometimes throw Alonso in. But yeah, I think given how Baku was as well, I think Checo will take the win.
Verper and Leclerc. There we go. Owain?
I'm going to go for Verstappen and then Perez and then Stroll. That's where I'm going. Yep.
All predictions are later.
No, I'm doing them now.
Okay. I am gonna. Oh Jesus! I'm gonna go with Verstappen. Then I'm gonna go with Leclerc, and then I'm gonna go with Alonso. I reckon some sort of reliability with Perez will take him off the podium, or a bad strategy call when they tell him to get out of the way because he's getting too good. So, Sophia, finally, last prediction, bold prediction for this weekend.
even though I like my stats and my recurring information, with the Logan Sargent, I think he will get points for his home race, one of his home races. Actually, I think it is his proper one because he's from Florida as well. So it's one of his home race pretty much for this season. So I think Logan won't finish 16th, will be classified as 16th. He will actually get a point. I'm not thinking it's going to be higher than 10th.
Okay. And Owain?
I'm going to go, bearing in mind they've only got 1 point, I'm going to go double points for Williams. Don't care what way round it happens. I'm just...
So you're also going for Logan Sargent to break his stats of 16?
Piggybacking.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm not... there's no way he continues to get 16th. He's not so sharks who always get 6th.
I'm going to go with Oscar Piastri to both out-qualify and then score more points than Lando Norris this weekend. I think it's his time. He's slowly growing into that car, and it's time he put Lando fully in his place, even though I love you, Lando.
But he doesn't know the track, though. He's never raced there, whereas Lando has for 1 year. So that'll be quite interesting.
It's bold. That's
yeah.
He's just that good.
He's just that good, you know. Good old Oscar. So thank you for listening. If you do enjoy this podcast, we'd love it if you could take 5 to leave us 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Every review is greatly appreciated, and we love hearing your feedback. We are also available on YouTube, where most of our episodes are recorded live. This one isn't. But for all of our qualifying reviews, sprint reviews, whichever reviews, race reviews, they are all recorded live straight onto YouTube, so you can listen to them immediately after the race and get to interact and comment and let us know your personal biases and how much you hate various drivers. It's always fun to hear from people. You can also search for the Grid Talk podcast on Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search the F1 Grid Talk podcast, and we have a backlog of over 270 shows. So if you are really stuck with something to listen to before the Miami Grand Prix, we have so many shows. Just give them a listen. They're fun. Also, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights, and better recording equipment for all of our hosts. And just please subscribe. We're really trying to push our subscribe count. So make sure to subscribe and also hit the bell notifications so you are notified as soon as we upload any pre-recorded podcasts like the Fireside or our Formula Talk podcast, or as soon as we go live. So I'd like to thank my guests and let them plug whatever they wish to plug. So Sophia, of course you are a Grid Talk co-host, but which show do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I do a weekly show called Formula Talk, where we look more so in F2 and F3, but we do dabble in a few other race events, such as F1 Academy that just happened this weekend, IndyCar as well, FRECA. It's joined by some familiar faces of the Good Talk family. This week we'll be looking with Tom Downey. We're recording tomorrow actually for it, discussing F1 Academy and F2. I also work with Everything F1, which does articles and podcasts. You can find us on social media at Join EF1 or our website, everythingf1.com. Again, F1, F2, F3, pretty much anything. We're getting kind of big into FE as well recently with some of our articles. So take a look at the website or on social media for that as well.
And Owain, where can people find more from you?
I'm not going to plug my Twitter anymore because it's Twitter, and I don't want to do that anymore. So you can find me hosting the Grid Talk podcast as and when. That's pretty much it.
Fair enough. And I would also plug my Twitter account, but if I did, I would. For my employment reasons, I just wouldn't anyway, and also Twitter. So we will be back, of course, this weekend for the Miami Grand Prix. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, probably bad. You can hear all the reaction from us on an hour after each session, an hour after qualifying and the race. So thank you very much for listening to the Gords Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.